All right, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for being here for Arrow's webinar series, which we're calling the Breadth of Educational Options. And just a really quick bit about Arrow. Arrow has been around for over 30 years, and Arrow's mission is, simply put, to bring learner-directed, learner-centered education to everyone, to make it available and accessible to everyone. And actually, here tonight is Jerry Mintz, who founded Arrow. So, Jerry, I don't know if you want to say hello and say a couple of words before we turn it over to Carlo.
Hello, I'm Jerry.
Jerry is would you say expert ping pong player, Jerry? Like, how
I'm
would
a,
you just,
I'm a better teacher than I'm a player. I'm a decent player. I had a serious injury to my leg a month and a half ago or longer, and I'm just recovering now. I've started to play again. Um, and I pretty much continued to teach, but I think like yesterday I was teaching a couple of kids, and they're actually getting pretty good. One of them actually took a game off me. I can show you something here. Hold on. Uh, so you can see how she plays.
oh, yeah. Wow, she's quick.
Yeah, so she's 9,
Wow.
and her brother's 10. He's better than she is. They've only been playing. I've only been teaching them for about 3 months.
Awesome. All right. Well, we can certainly get back to that in some of our questions. But without further ado, I want to turn it over to Carlo Ricci. And Carlo, take it away.
All right. Well, first, I'm really happy to see all of you here. And in the spirit of unschooling, I'm hoping that we'll not, we'll turn this into a conversation rather than me speaking at you. I'll share a little bit of one possibility of a direction that we can go in, and then I'm happy to open it up and just hear what other people have to say. And as I'm speaking, if anybody has something that they'd like to ask, or if they'd like to share something, just feel free to interrupt. I'm very open to that. I'm very comfortable with that. And we'll go from there. So I teach at a faculty of education in a graduate studies department. So, and I have 2 children. I'm married. And so one thing that I thought we might be interested in talking about is I'll just read a little bit of what I put out there just as a reminder for people. And it just says that I will share what unschooling means to me and to my family. I'll share how we have embraced unschooling as an approach to living, and how I believe that unschooling has value beyond an alternative to schooling. It is a philosophy of life and living. And I'll share how my now 21-year-old daughter is getting ready to start her clinicals. She's in her final term of medical school, 5th term. And my 19-year-old daughter is in her 2nd year of law school, and how the unschooling worldview or approach or philosophy helped them set them up for success. And again, it'll be interactive, and I invite those who wish to share whatever it is they'd like to share to join if people feel the need to, or that feel like they would like to. So for me, unschooling is not just about school. It's about a worldview. It's a philosophy of living. So what does unschooling mean to me in terms of how I live my life? So as a parent, I had a particular vision. Like, I see these types of theoretical frameworks, and unschooling to me is a theoretical framework, as almost software, right, for human beings. And so unschooling is part of my software. Unschooling is part of how I live my life, and what helps guide me make decisions and to live in the way that I live. So that particular worldview, we all have a philosophy of life. We have a philosophy of living, of teaching, of interacting with other people, with the world at large, with human beings and, you know, other beings that we share the planet with and the universe with. And so, you know, this worldview, this type of theoretical framework, drives a lot of what we do. So whether you're aware of it or not, you have a philosophy of living, you have a philosophy of teaching, you have a philosophy of parenting, of everything you could imagine. You have a philosophy that's connected with that. Now, some of us are really in tune with and become aware of what that particular worldview and philosophy is, and we could sort of articulate it, whereas others just keep it within and just live their life. But if you think deeply and look deeply inside yourself, all of us, you know, and there's always room to, you know, learn more. It's not like I've reached some type of pinnacle, but I purposefully try to reflect on what is my philosophy, what is it, you know, what drives me. And really there are three different theoretical frameworks. One of them is unschooling or self-determined learning, or what I call willed learning, WILLED learning, or the other is critical pedagogy, and then holistic education. So what do I get briefly from those three? Holistic education, what resonates with me is the notion of love, care, compassion, how everything is interconnected. You know, the world that we live in, we're interconnected with the earth. For example, we get everything from the earth. We cannot exist without the earth. We are at one with the earth. You know, we breathe the air, water, clothing, everything you could think of, we get from it. So we have to be fundamentally aware of that and the interconnection of everything, relationships. So those types of things are what I really get from holistic education. The fact that we focus on body, mind, spirit, and emotions. And again, love is central, I think, to all of this. Critical pedagogy, that philosophy or worldview tries to get us to think about who benefits, who gets left out. How do we make the world a better place? What does it mean to make the world a better place? Paulo Freire talks about making it less racist, less sexist, less ageist, less homophobic, less, and so on. Critical pedagogy also looks at who has a voice, who doesn't, who's silenced, and so on. And so those three different views, you know, and the unschooling, of course, is looking at making the learner the center of what to learn, when to learn, how, whether opt in or opt out, and so on and so forth. So as a parent, and as a human being, how do I live my life according to those theoretical frameworks? And unschooling specifically is what I'm going to focus on, even though everything is interconnected, as I mentioned. So one of the things I did was, you know, you stay invisible, you stay out of their way, you trust them, you allow for independence, you help when asked. So it's not that you would say, oh, well, you know, you're a free human being, go figure it out on your own. If somebody asks me something, it's courtesy, you know, you respond, right? It's about respect, it's about care, compassion, trust. Again, love is at the center. How do you do things in a gentle way, in a peaceful way? So when my children were young, I didn't tell them that they could not do one thing or another. Like they cooked, they cleaned, they did laundry, they made their bed, they helped, you know, around the house, gardening, everything. Like they just, whatever they wanted to participate in, they were free to do that. And they also recognized that, you know, we live as a family, we live as a community. It's not fair if one person's doing everything and nobody else is helping out. So it's about coming together, right? And it's about making that understanding of fairness and what people in a loving community would do for each other and with each other, right? They always decided what to wear, when to sleep. They rode public transit when they were very young, on their own. They got their driver's license as soon as they were eligible. My 16-year-old daughter, who's now in medical school, she knew she wanted to be a doctor. So part of my research interest is to look at alternative programming for people all the way from birth till all the way through. So I knew a little bit about different programs. Here in Canada, it's pretty complicated, or they extend it to become a medical doctor. You have to get an undergraduate for the most part. Then write your MCATs, apply to medical school and so on. But it's not like that in other parts of the world. So we visited different medical schools in different parts of the world. We went to Ireland, for example, Scotland, the UK, and Grenada was one of the schools that she was interested in as well. And so you could get into those schools right out of high school. So when you're of that particular age, you could apply and go right into a medical school. And so we visited a whole bunch of different schools. When she was 16, she decided she wanted to go on her own to Grenada to visit the school that she's currently at, St. George's University. They have a summer institute. So she worked with cadavers and, realized that this is indeed something she wants to do, and she liked it. And so at the age of 16, she did that on her own. My other daughter, when she was 18, she wants to be a lawyer. So again, there are other parts of the world you can get into law school right out of high school or, that particular age. And so she's currently at University College London, which is ranked #1 law school in the UK by some. It fluctuates between UCL, Harvard, and UCL, Oxford, and Cambridge. So she's very lucky to be there. When she was 18, she went on her own. She said, "Dad, I love you, but I want to do this by myself." So she got on the plane. She went to London on her own. She got a gym membership because she loves to go to the gym. She got her groceries, her apartment, she set herself up. So young people are capable, whether you're 16, 18 or younger. For a lot of it, we don't really give them in many cases, the mainstream system just sees people as incapable when they're thoroughly capable of doing things. Some of my daughter's friends who are in her medical school but are part of the nursing program started the program when they were 16 years of age, and now they're 19 and finishing up their nursing degrees. And so young people are capable of doing these things. You don't have to wait till you're 25 to enter a medical program or a law program or a nursing program and so on. So young people have these potentials, and some of the people in my daughter's medical school now have degrees already. Some of them have masters. Some of them are 27, 28, because they went the more traditional route rather than going in right after high school and going right into medical school. And she's holding her own with them, right? And, she's doing as well as or better than many of these, her colleagues who have prior schooling. So there are these myths that you have to do A before you get to B. Learning is not linear that way. That's another thing that I've learned from this unschooling philosophy, is that learning is messy, right? You don't have to learn A before you learn B. You could sort of do things in very individual ways and personal ways. And it depends on the individual. And so people can jump in whenever they feel that they want to, if that's what they feel like they want to be doing, right? So My daughters decided whether to attend school or not. And even when they were in school, they still lived by the unschooling worldview in the sense that they were able to decide what, when, where, how, uh, why are they doing one thing or another. They've always been free and autonomous and confident. And they were always, felt really loved, I think. And so they knew that they would be supported regardless of whatever decision they decided to do. And now they're capable and they know they can because they're used to doing things their whole life. They weren't told that you're too young, wait, you can't pick up a knife yet, you're not of age, or you can't use the stove, or they've always been trusted. If they feel that they could do it, safely, obviously, and go ahead. And they've always been independent in that way and treated like they could do whatever. The word no wasn't really part of our parenting worldview. It was, sure, go ahead. And so they've believed their whole life that they could. And it's not that, there's never any challenges, going to a new country, learning things on your own. Sometimes there are challenges, of course, but they dealt with it, right? They did it. They were, they decided they were going to do it, and they were confident, and they were able to make it work. And now they're thriving, So the first time my daughter went to Grenada, obviously, was a little bit more challenging than this time. So she's been there for 4 years now. So I just dropped her off at the airport last week, and she was home for the break. And it was a different experience, right? It was okay. She knew 30 people on her flight that are also part of her program, and so on and so forth. And so, and she's gained confidence when she looks at where she is today versus where she was 4 years ago. It's like, yes, I did it. I can do it. And I'm doing it. So, and, even going back to this whole notion of unschooling, and I'm conscious of time because I want to hear everybody else's story who wishes to share, but play is also extremely important. A lot of people see play as a waste of time, but it's not, right? Play is central to learning. Play is learning. And I think we have to continue to recognize how learning happens as we're playing. It's just, you're playing with whatever, whether it's ping pong or, a piano, or with math or physics or whatever it is that you're doing. As you're playing, you're learning things. And I just want to read a couple of definitions of learning. One is from John Holt and the other is from Krishnamurti. And Holt writes, living is learning. It is impossible to be alive and conscious, and some would say unconscious, without constantly learning things. So schools try to say that there's learning that happens in school, and then there's other things like play or, whatever people are doing. But, within the unschooling philosophy, the idea is that everything is learning. As Holt says, living is learning. It is impossible to be alive and conscious, and some would say unconscious, without constantly learning things. So just imagine how empowering it is if you have this worldview or this philosophy that everything you're doing is learning. When you're playing, it's also learning. Whatever you're doing is a learning experience. And similarly, Krishnamurti says, the whole movement of life is learning. There is never a time when there is no learning. Every action is a movement of learning, and every relationship is learning, and so on, right? And so, just to think about this a bit, if you spend time doing what you will, WILL, self-determination, deciding what you want to do, what do you learn when you're doing that? So let's say you spend a year focusing on playing darts or ping pong or whatever. What do you actually learn as you're doing those particular activities? Everybody's different, of course. Who knows what people are going to learn? a whole bunch of different things about, you know, their own bodies, history, you know, all kinds of things. But you also learn about who you are. You learn about yourself. You learn about whether darts is something you want to pursue, whether it's for fun or professionally or whatever, ping pong. And of course, people make a living playing video games, darts, whatever, ping pong, and so on. So you learn that also that you have agency and that it's up to you to choose how you live your life, right? You learn about being focused. You learn about learning and what you need to do to learn one thing or another, right? It's not so much about the content, but it's about the process as well. So once you figure out about learning and who you are, you can then apply it to any learning you want to do. So, you know, many people do not have the opportunity to say no, to figure out who they are, what they like, to figure out how they learn best. Whereas within unschooling and self-determination, it allows for all of that to happen. And you could almost call it like a hidden curriculum. So what do you learn as you unschool, as you self-determine? So we've benefited tremendously, I think, from this particular worldview. And again, it's not just about whether you're a schooler or you're attending school. If you're attending school, you could still, you know, school is a part of your life. It's not the whole day, right? So you could also unschool the rest of the time, right? This philosophy, once it becomes a part of you, once it's inside you, once you realize the importance of love and care and compassion and peace and gentleness, this you know, particular worldview could all of a sudden take over in very powerful ways, right? And you realize there's a compartmentalized part of your day that might be more structured than what you really do, but you're choosing to go there. You know, that was the case for my daughters. And within their life, they were free to do whatever they liked, right? And I'm just going to pause there because like I said, I'm interested in also hearing your reaction. And I don't want to assume I know what you're hoping for us to discuss here, but I want to open it up so that we can then have a conversation and go in whatever direction those in the room want to go in. So I'll just pause there and hope that resonates with people and makes sense.
So I would say what we'll do here is if folks even want to ask a question or add something or just share something, just go ahead and use the raise your hand function, and then we can just kind of call you out, and then you can unmute your mic, and we can do it that way. So, all right, I see a hand raised. Renee, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. That's right. Do I have to lower? Okay, there we go. Hi, Carlo. It's really great to hear you speak. I've been reading your work and reading work that references you for many years. So it's kind of like a little bit of like, oh my gosh, I get to speak to Carlo Ricci. So it's lovely.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your kind words.
So my question, and I don't want to necessarily take the whole conversation here, but this is my question for you, is how do you apply your unschooling philosophy to your work as a, I imagine that do you teach graduate students and supervise them? And the reason I'm asking this question is because I am in graduate studies right now, in educational studies at Concordia in Montreal. I'm just finishing up. And I'm like, how do these ideas get lived out in academia?
Right. So I think first of all, I have to wait till I retire to really reveal all of it. But you know, part of it is you do it in a humble way, right? So I try to infuse my classes with unschooling as a philosophy, right? So I'm working on a book. Peter contributed a chapter, and a number of people probably have on ungrading. So how do I do that within the structured environment? So obviously the university I work at is pretty structured, but when I start my classes, I invite people always, does anybody want to start us off? Does anybody have anything to say? So this is our space now. So there's the curriculum, but there's also, what do we want to do? What are we interested in? What would we like to do and accomplish within this, right? I also think that marking is probably one of the most harmful practices within a mainstream school system. So how do I diminish that that understanding? So I tell my students, if you're super stressed and you want to know your final mark, let's have a conversation and I'll tell you what it is. We'll get it out of the way, because why are we here? So this is what I say to them. Why are we here? So we're here not so I could figure out what number different people are, because that's dehumanizing to me and that's dehumanizing to you. The reason why hopefully we're here is because we're all interested in making the world a better place. So how can, you know, all the people in this room, for example, come together and push, you know, each other to think about what can each and every one of us do to make the world better? And it doesn't have to be like this grand exercise or take up a whole bunch of, it could be just next time I go to the grocery store, I'm going to put my cart aside, see somebody who might need help, and I'm just going to help them shop, which I've done, right? Or I'm just going to smile at somebody tomorrow, or I'm going to start a conversation with somebody, right? So for me, I try to get the point across to my students that the reason why we're here is not to rank each other or to figure out what number people are, but to try to figure out how can each and every one of us make a difference in, you know, with the planet that we live on, with our friends, our family, our enemies, you know, our other beings within the world, living beings, non-beings. How could we do better, right? And to me, that's the purpose. So, you know, and I think that resonates with people, that they really understand that, yes, okay, well, that kind of makes more sense than trying to figure out what the textbook is saying and everybody gets a number within the textbook. And, you know, because I believe that everything is interconnected, we could talk about anything and it'll relate to what the course topic is, right? Because everything eventually comes together relationally. Does that help, Renee? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I guess the thing that I really get stuck on is the grading and the marking and the ranking, and obviously you've said something about that, but like, does your institution have certain requirements of you in terms of how many like students can fall in certain ranges and stuff and what?
Yes. So I taught at different universities. So I taught at U of T, I taught at Brock, and I was at institutions, and it depends who the dean is. Like I've been at Nipissing now for over 20 years. And so you get different people who come in and have different perspectives. But I think the key is you do it in a humble way, right? So I don't come out saying, you know, guns a-blazing and just you guys are all, no, I do my own thing, right? And then if they ask me, you know, well, is this working? Well, as you know, when you work at a university, students fill out surveys. And so fortunately, my teaching scores are really high. And the students often write things like, I've never learned more in a course than I have in this particular course. So if people challenge me, I could just say, well, look, talk to the students and they'll let you know whether the philosophy is working or not, right? So I taught at universities where I got reprimanded and received a letter from the chair of the department saying that I have to learn to better discriminate among students, right? So yes, I mean, there are expectations of those types of things. But you know, you just do your thing, right? And if you do it in a humble way, I think there's always room for, you know, and you have to know yourself. Everybody will do things in a different way, right? So you have to know what you're comfortable doing, what other people are comfortable with, and you know, just try to find your way and to resist as much as you feel comfortable doing, and to do whatever it is you can within that particular context, right? We can always do things in gentler, more peaceful, loving ways, even within very rigid, structured institutions. And so, that's how I do things. And my assignments are always open-ended. So, do what you want. So I've had people paint, I've had people do poetry, I've had people make pizza, I've had people knit things. It's always open. And you would think, well, how can you give somebody a credit for knitting? And this one, situation that I'm thinking of, I mean, she's in a graduate program. She's written so many papers her whole life. She's always wanted to learn how to knit. Unfortunately, her mother was a knitter and grandmother, and they passed away before she had opportunity. She moved into a new home. She noticed there was an older woman across the street that was a knitter. And so she thought, I'm going to go up to that person and spend time with her and have her teach me how to knit. And so what would another paper have meant to her life? As opposed to, who knows what conversations they've had, the relationships that they've built. And she's wanted to learn how to knit. So she's grown personally in so many ways, right? So I think once you start couching things and realizing how you can make all of these things justifiable, then you just open it up, right? So, and all of my assignments are always, it's not, here are 3 questions, pick one. It's, this is what we're talking about. What's happening in your life? And how does this, what types of connections can you make, or do you want to make with this? And what way do you want to present your learning? Because when we share information, we could do it verbally, we could do it written, we could do it through dance, we could do it through art, we could do it through music. There are all kinds of ways. So why not embrace all those ways of sharing information? So the more you open yourself up, I think, then the more you begin to realize, well, we could do this in very different ways, even in very structured institutions.
Thank you for that. And I think you have very lucky students. And I think they're very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
All right, Jerry, I see your hands up, so go ahead.
So first of all, Carlo, before I say anything, I want to know, what's my grade going to be?
What do you like, Jerry? For you, if anybody gives you less than 100%, I think they failed appreciating what you've done with Arrow and with your life and everything. I tell my students, I've got a PhD. I know you've got a master's, right, Jerry? But I say to them, if you really want to know what's going on, don't ask me, email Jerry. So, there are all these myths. Look at, Chris Mergliano, who was, he doesn't have a teaching degree, I believe, right? But
No.
So we don't need all of these accolades and all of these numbers and marks and degrees in order to justify. And I even say to my students, everything I'm sharing with you now, all of this, none of it did I learn in school. Like, I never read John Holt as a student. I never read, any of the other people that now have influenced me and so on. So I think you've contributed more to my learning, Jerry, than any of my professors have in this sense, right? So
I with 100, I feel free to talk. So one question that occurred to me is, I've talked to a lot of people who have gone to college who'd like to take a year off and then go, and your kids did the opposite. And I wonder, why was that, do you think?
It was their decision. So what
Did they unschool all the way through?
No, well, they did, in the sense that, as I shared before, they did go to formal schooling, but the underlying worldview and parental environment that they were in was always within the context of unschooling. So it's kind of complicated like that. I remember my youngest daughter, I took her to junior kindergarten, and she looked at me and said, I don't want to be here. So we left. And then my wife called me, and my wife's a teacher, and she said, so how'd it go? I said, oh, fantastic. And she said, well, what happened? I said, well, we went and we're home now. She decided she doesn't want to go to school. And my wife said, well, she's 4. And I said, no, but she can't. Anyway, long story short, she didn't go to school for a number of years and then decided she wanted to go in. When she transitioned back into the schooling system, she was beyond, anybody else. Like, she fit in perfectly. She could transition in and out without any issues. And so, they took this path. Why did my daughter want to become a doctor? I don't know. Grey's Anatomy had something to do with it, probably. My wife got cancer. She lost part of her leg. She has an internal prosthetic. And so, when we travel, we need a wheelchair and so on. And so my daughter saw that and realized what the medical profession did to help her mom. And I think she embraced part of that, and she wanted to, to do that. And so when they said, my youngest daughter, she just wanted to be a lawyer. And so I thought, okay, how can we do this in the gentlest way possible? And so I figured, you don't have to go to school for 10 years to become a doctor. You could go now, start now. And for my daughter, who's a lawyer, she's going to be a lawyer next year. She's going to be 20 years old and have her law degree from University College London, which you probably have heard of. It's it's ranked, I think, number 9 in the world as a university. So, she's in a very good place. There were 6,000 applicants. They only accepted 200 students. So, it was pretty competitive, and she's in a good place, and she's going to be a lawyer in 3 years. So here, if she stayed in Canada, she would be still working on her undergrad, and it would take, at least 6 to 8 years for her to become a lawyer, right? And once she's done, in order to get credentialed here, she's going to start her master's next year. And so there are gentler ways for them to get in to do what they want to do. So they definitely had the option, if they wanted to, take a year off or a gap year or do whatever they wanted to do. But, the decision was theirs, and they wanted to move on and start. And so that's what we did.
Okay, makes sense. By the way, this was a project that Carlo and I worked on. Has anybody read this book? You got 1 or 2 here, have you? 3, okay, good. So you should definitely get it. It's a good book. Turning Points. Turning Points.
Do we have any more?
I taught the course where I used that book, Jerry, this past term, and
Yeah.
Students were really, really impressed with all of the contributors. Like, I think it's very impressive, the list of people that contributed to that particular text. And, the great thing about it is that we didn't focus just on unschooling or democratic schooling. It's all kinds of different people. Some people from the mainstream, some people who are Waldorf and, Montessori, just a whole bunch of different alternative options, all within that particular book. And if you look at the list of names of people who contributed, Alfie Cohn wrote the foreword to it. It's, I think, a pretty impressive list. And then I'm glad we got it together, because I still remember I was in a hotel room and the idea hit me, and I called Jerry and I said, Jerry, should we do this? And he said, yes. And then we did. So
That's it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Little did we know. Oh, well.
Yeah.
All right. I have my own hand up, so I'm going to jump in here.
Call on you, Peter.
Yes, call on me. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. And what's my grade? I hope I get close to 100. Anyway, so Carl, I wanted to speak to a little bit about when you were talking about, how you gently use ungrading and unschooling and self-directed learning. And it's interesting because I think, as you know, I work at a few different universities, but one of the main things I do is in the Doctor of Educational Leadership program. And it's interesting because I have a similar approach to you in terms of saying, you know, we're gonna focus on why you're here, right? What's the stone in your shoe? What do you want to know? What do you want out of this? Yes, and I say it right up front. Yes, I have to give you a grade because, Southern New Hampshire University says I have to, right? So there's a grade and it's going to be a number, right? It's going to be a number. But guess what, right? We're not going to talk about that much at all, right? We're going to put that off to the side. We're going to make that something that's kind of in the background. And yeah, as you're going through and you're working on, the things that are getting you closer to your dissertation, what we're going to do instead is we're going to have really rich, thick discussions about these things. We're going to get feedback from everybody. We're going to dive deep into this. And yeah, that number that you end up with is just really, to be fair, is really just so we're ticking the boxes, right? It has nothing to do, or very little, I should say, to do with, your progress that you feel that you're making, right? I'm just here as someone who's really kind of like holding this together for you and maybe giving you a little bit of guidance and somebody to bounce things off of. And yeah, I share my experiences and the things that I've been through, but really ultimately this is what that is. And I feel like, and I'm glad that you said that because I started out, I think, as a New York City public school teacher. Um, and I had the pleasure of meeting John Taylor Gatto way back when I was doing my undergrad, teaching degree. And really from like a lot of the things that he said, grades were really kind of in the background of what we did. I'm not saying I didn't do grades. I'm not saying I didn't do that, but it was really less of like focusing on that and more about, you know, what is it that you're really here for? What do you really want? Like you're here, so what are we going to do? And yeah, a grade is a grade, but what does that really even mean? And I can tell you that I had amazing discussions with seventh graders, right? I mean, we call them seventh graders because they were around that age, right? But, 11, 12, 13-year-olds talking about great and like the level of discussion we were just able to get into was just incredible. So I wanted to say that, but I actually have a question for you. So, um, I think you probably know that in our world right now, there's a lot of how do you say arriving at the truth, so to speak. And I'm using air quotes, right? And when I say truth, like objective truths, right? Things that we can know and see in front of us, and we understand. That seems to be under attack with a lot of other things. I'm wondering how you feel unschooling. I guess before I ask the question, I'll reveal sort of my thought about that. Is I feel like the unschooling or self-directed education, holistic education, is in a way going to save us from that, right? In a sense that I don't know, like I just feel like those philosophies are different because you're doing all the things that you talked about, right? Learning is life, life is learning. But I'm just wondering what your thoughts on that and how you feel, that sort of plays into this, um, we don't know what the truth is anymore kind of idea.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is, uh, the saying, I'll, believe it when I see it. People say, I'll see it when I believe it, right? That's kind of the where we are now, where, you distort things in ways as much as possible, just to make sure that it fits your scheme of things rather than worrying about truth. It's like, so they flip that saying, I'll believe it when I see it. It's I'll see it when I believe it. So if I believe in something, I'll see it no matter where, right? So I think, you know, it's a battle, right? And you have to constantly work towards moving in directions where you focus on that. But before I say more about that, let me just go back, you know, with my grading. So what I do is I don't give students grades on any assignment throughout the whole course. So when people first take a course with me, sometimes they're pretty anxious, right? And I try to calm them down on the first day, because I tell them, I'm going to give you a grade. I'm almost 100% certain you're going to be happy with your grade. If you're not happy with it, call me right away before I input it into the system, and I'll make sure that you're going to be happy with it. Like, so, but people still don't believe that, right? They still think that I'm lying, or there's a trick, or something else is going to happen. You know, it's not really, because I even say to them, like, what does it mean if you get a 98 in this course? What does it mean if you get a 60 in this course? If you get a 98, does it mean that, you know, for example, you've got 3 tutors, you've got all the financial resources in the world, you have all this time to read, to focus, to study. If you have a 60%, what does that mean? Does it mean you're hungry? You've got 3 jobs, you can't afford to, you know, the textbooks. You know, you don't have parents who have PhDs that you could sit at the table and talk to, or math professionals, or, you know, whatever the situation might be, right? It could be all kinds of different things. But, you know, I guess I should correct a little bit of that, because, you know, when people homeschool, there's data that shows that regardless of whether you have a PhD in education or whether you're a elementary school dropout, your children do just as well. So, you know, the big thing about homeschooling is that it's one-on-one instruction. For the most part, it's, you know, small group. And that's one of the best teaching learning strategies, right? So in terms of the grading and so on, that's how I approach it. And that's how I try to get them to be relaxed. And so the first time people are skeptical, right? They don't believe what I'm saying. Then when they keep taking courses with me, they realize, okay, you know, I don't even care. Like, I'm not getting a number throughout the course. I'm not stressed about it. I don't care. I know what's going to happen in the end. And we could focus on learning. You know, I give a lot of formative feedback. I share my thoughts. So when somebody writes a paper, I probably write more to them than they wrote to me, just because it gets me to think about things. You know, great, you know, this is what I'm thinking when you say that. You know, it's just an interaction, it's a conversation that we're having. Marginalia is what Mark Kingwell calls it. You know, you just like to write in the margins, and I like to interact with what they've said. So that's kind of how I deal with it. And I try to emphasize, you know, in my class, I say, okay, who's had a course with me before? Could you please tell the people that haven't had a course with me what it's like, just to try to, so I try the, you know, the best I can. And then sometimes just some people are just, you know, need more reassurance. So I tell them, phone me. What number do you want in the end? I can't give everybody 100% because, you know, you just can't do that, right? But what number do you want? And, you know, I think Jerry would find this interesting. Once in my 20 plus years, I've had a student call me and say, I think the mark you gave me was too high. Can you please lower it? That's happened once in 20 plus years of teaching. And I just thought, okay, what's the point, you know? But so, you know, this is where we are. And so, you know, to your other question, how do we deal with truth, right? It's a philosophical question. These types of big, you know, epistemological, ontological, like all of these different types of big questions. And I think it's by constantly challenging each other, right? Where you have to just say, like, where people think when they first come into my classes that they're doing good work as educators. And, you know, then you have somebody that's telling them that students are being wounded. Let's have a conversation about that. And so many people come around to it after. Not everybody agrees 100%, obviously. But they're free to disagree, right? So some people say in my classes, you're indoctrinating people. No, I'm not. I'm just sharing a perspective, and then I'm allowing them to disagree with me. So if you disagree with me, your mark at the end isn't going to be lower than it would be if you agree with me. So in a sense, there's more of an opportunity for people to share and for us to look at how do we get to some sense of a truth here as we move forward. And a lot of it is values based. So it's not even focused on truth, right? It depends on your values. And so how do you have that conversation about how to get the values aspect into that conversation, right?
Yeah, that's great. And just to reveal, I'm actually working on a little bit of writing for my Substack, and that's the topic is what happened to truth, basically, right? And
Right.
so I might quote you. I'll send it to you before I put it out. Then, if I use any of your quotes there.
Yeah, no,
Um,
happy. Yeah.
yeah, that's so. I mean, I think the interesting thing about the ungrading piece and really like, it's interesting because in a lot of ways, especially when you're going through the conventional system, you're used to that, right? It's just kind of part of it, and it's like when that's not there, and I think I had to realize too because I think in the beginning, Carl, I wasn't humble like you. It's like, oh, we're not doing grades, right? And I didn't realize that approaching it that way wasn't really the best way to do it, right? Because what you're doing is you're taking the legs out in a way, right? And so now, and as you know, I have a background in mental health and and all that, and I didn't my counselor hat, I guess, wasn't on to realize, oh, I need to really support this and do this gently because I'm just like taking out,
Yeah.
taking out a foundation for people, which is
And you don't want to
as you
draw that attention to yourself.
right, and that's the other thing, right? Flying
Yeah.
under the radar, which yes, I learned as I went that was, I won't say a better way, but a more gentler way, in a way that's going to just allow for more things to happen. But I see Jerry has his hand up again, so I want to get to Jerry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah.
I just want to ask Hallie, where are you in Vermont? And what do you do there?
Me? Um, I'm in northern Vermont, only about half an hour south of Canada,
What
and I just completed my master's degree. I'm a lifelong unschooler. I got my undergraduate degree at Goddard, and I went back there for my master's, and in all the chaos last spring, when they shut down, I ended up at Prescott and still working with an old Goddard advisor, which was wonderful. Um, So it was all self-designed, and I'm now trying to start my own business, um, equine assisted personal and professional development workshops. And I want to explain self-directed education through working with horses as a unique way to explain that. So bringing parents and educators into my property to do long retreats and talk about communication and co-regulation and self-directed learning, but all through working with horses.
town are you in?
Lowell, tiny little town, Northeast Kingdom.
Hmm.
I'm about an hour and a half north of Burlington, 45 minutes north of Stowe.
School in Burlington for 17 years, and so I know the area pretty well. I know where you are, and I graduated from Goddard too.
Awesome.
My master's from Antioch, New England. And so, yes, and I'm also on the alumni committee that's working on keeping Goddard functioning in some way or another.
Nice.
We have meetings every week or two.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I haven't really been connected, but it's
Well, we're
That's
getting somewhere. We even have a lawyer that's working on it. And so there's a serious group of alumni that's determined to keep Goddard going in some form. And there's a guy who has sort of tentatively bought the college. Did you know that?
I've heard reports of different people trying to buy the campus and it falling through and all kinds of stuff. I don't know where it stands.
It's not going to be finalized, I think, till May, but apparently he has set it up and he has a vision for the college, which is not too far from ours. He would like to see Goddard continue in some form, as well as other, other organizations be part of it and live there.
Cool.
And of course, they just had that serious flooding in Plainfield, and a number of people are living on campus now who had no place else to go.
Nice. Yeah.
Do you-
I mean, it's such a beautiful campus with a lot of history, and I'd really love to see it used in some really supportive, creative way.
I go back to some of the earliest years, and I was there. I knew Tim Pitkin quite well, who's the one who kind of set up Goddard in its radical form. So I'm very interested in whatever we need to do to keep it functioning.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm hoping that now that I've got a little bit more time, I can reconnect with folks and see what's going on.
Haley, do you know the Compass School in Vermont? They're in Putney,
Okay.
and they're I would say progressive education. So they may be interested in, the things that you're offering. So if you like, I can put you in touch. I know the director of the school, and I can put you in touch with her, and maybe you all can chat and see if there's a there. So,
That would
all
be awesome.
yeah. All right. So we are actually at 9 p.m. here on the East Coast, but Carlo, do you have a few more minutes, just
Sure.
in case there's any more questions or thoughts or things like that? I know we're going to go a little bit over time, but if anyone else has anything to share or a question or anything like that, just go ahead and unmute your mic at this point and
Or
jump
I
right
could
in if
even
you have.
ask a question. I'd be interested if anybody wants to share how unschooling has played out in their own life, if they'd like to share a story about how that worldview and that philosophy, by embracing it, what's come of it and what's come of your lives as a result of it, something like that. If anybody's interested in sharing that.
I mean, that's something I could talk about all day. Um, I really appreciate this conversation and getting to meet all of you, and it's really wonderful. Um, yeah, I I'm very proud to say that I have my master's degree and have never once received a grade, which, except for, my driver's license test, like that's it. Um, I love I love explaining unschooling philosophy to people, and one story that I talk about a lot is like learning to read. And I didn't learn to read independently until I was almost 11. But my grandfather read to me hours every night. My mom read to me all the time. Books were all around. And I was never pressured to read. And I was never judged or quizzed. And my first books that I read on my own was the Harry Potter series. And it was because my grandfather had read it to me. And then I picked it up and I was like, I want to read this again. And I worked my way through it and I would sound things out. And then, I'd get stuck on a word and I would ask my mom or my grandmother, I'd spell it and they'd say, yep, that's the word. And I had the vocabulary. I just didn't know what it looked like on paper. And I'd guess that it took me about 6 months to read the series. And the first book I probably only read about 20%. And by the end, I was probably reading 95%. And because my grandfather had read me the series before, it didn't matter. And my grandparents had started getting worried that I was 10 and not reading. And for the next 10 years, they were worried that I wouldn't stop reading. But there's just so many examples. Like, I didn't ever do formal math, but I helped build my house when I was 13. And, you know, just the carpentry math and the math of having horses and building fences and um, tiling the bathroom. So I just love to talk about how there's learning everywhere. And it's, yeah, the old unschooling t-shirt, learning through living, unschoolers get it. Like we always had those bumper stickers. But anyways, I really appreciate the conversation and everything. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
All right, so I think since we're about 5 minutes past the hour, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up for this evening. But
Peter,
Carlo,
Peter, there doesn't seem to be a way to contact people directly except you. So I see that Bill Hoyer is on here, and I haven't talked to him for years, and I just wanted to say hi to him and have him get in touch with me directly.
yeah, I dropped our contact info in the chat box. So there's also a way to sign up for the newsletter if anyone would like to get the Arrow newsletter and doesn't get it yet. There's a link to do that in the chat box, and also my email address and Jerry's email address is in the chat box as well. And we're always, feel free to contact us anytime with anything, any question, even if you just want to share something. If you have something for our newsletter that you'd like us to get into the newsletter, you can send it to Jerry or I or both of us, and we'll do our best to get in. We try to put them out on Thursdays or Fridays, so try to get it in as soon as you can for that week. But if it doesn't go in that week, it would go in for the next week. So again, please feel free to reach out. You'll be hearing a lot more from us. There's a lot more things on the horizon here. If any of you are interested in coming on and doing a talk like Carlo just did tonight, again, get in touch with us. We can chat about it and we can plug you in at some point. Carlo, again, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and see you and hear what you have going on. So thanks again for your time. For those of you who joined us tonight, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again. We actually have another webinar next week with a gentleman of the name of Ben Draper, and he's one of the founders of a self-directed education program in Massachusetts. So we'll have him on next week. But in the meantime, be safe, be well, and again, feel free to reach out to us anytime.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Carlo. Good night, everybody.
All right.